See, now we're talking. Good old cardboard man. So the title is exactly like it says. I wanted to get more into the conversations of servants being possessed. But before we get into that, I told myself that we gotta get off into the anomalies. So we're gonna be breaking down how SIEG was able to transform and cheat nearly everybody on the cast of Fate Apocrypha with flying colors. So conceptually, SIEG is very much like a pseudo-servant, a demi-servant, but he's never outright stated to be one. The thing about demi-servants is that foundation-wise, it's supposed to be a human being possessed with the saint graph or the core of said servant. SIEG, on the other hand, is not human whatsoever, and that's where the anomaly comes in. He's a homunculus. He was made to be a source of energy for the servants on Igmalinia's side. It was just to his advantage that he was able to gain sentience and he managed to escape on his own. So that ended up not being the case. Now, being that he is a homunculus, he's supposed to be suited for combat and he wouldn't go down from a natural death. But SIEG is not that type of homunculus. He was built to function differently. He's got first-rate magic circuits. His main focus, his primary function, is best suited to be a magical battery. So the moment that he tries to do anything out of that range, like fighting or activities that require a lot of effort, those defects were starting to pop up. And in the story itself, it outright said, he probably only has 3 years to live. That was initially, and then it started to change by the end of the series. Then we fast forward to him suffering this fatal injury from Gordes, and now they're telling us that he's got even less time than that. Siegfried, being the real one that he is, decided, well, hey, I can just sacrifice my life and just give him my heart so SIEG will be able to go on. And this isn't unlike Siegfried either. We all know him for being a benevolent character. That's pretty much what his lore was based around. So Apocrypha was just bringing that into the inverse mechanics. What they didn't know at the time is that the combination of Siegfried providing his heart to SIEG would end up giving him additional abilities, him becoming a possession servant, something that hadn't been done before, at least in the Apocrypha timeline. So between SIEG being a first-rate battery and Siegfried being a first-rate engine to operate with this battery, they come together to make something extremely horrifying. We get our first look at this when SIEG is trying to protect Astolfo from Mordred. Astolfo was a character that gave him a lot to believe in. That's his man's, and even though he knew he wouldn't be able to protect him physically, he couldn't help but reach his hand out to Astolfo in the same way that he offered to him when he was born, and he was lost and outright confused about the things that were going on. So when SIEG does this, he starts to tap into that other side, and we see that he now has gained his own form of command spells, essentially becoming a master of himself as a servant. This would formally become known as his dead count shapeshifter. They made it the same in FGO, and even in that timeline they gave the skill in EX. It's a skill that allows him to transform into Siegfried 3 times for 3 whole minutes apiece. Fortunately for him, fate-wise, a lot can happen in 3 minutes, and that was of course thanks to the fact that he had Siegfried's heart working as his foundation. He was using it like a magic core. This is where the cheating comes in. Not only does he have access to everything that Siegfried can do at will, but he's technically better because there's no restrictions. His only restriction is the time, but as a mana battery, his magical energy has that covered. If it was the real Siegfried, at the very least he'd have to worry about getting tired, and now he wouldn't even have to worry about that. We already know from the fight that the real Siegfried had with Karna that he could fight for 3 days and just be fine, and that's 3 days with no mana battery. Now imagine 3 days of him having one. So that's what I mean. It's ridiculous. And that's just scratching the surface, really. He gains his fight knowledge, he gains his experience, he's going toe to toe with Mordred of the Round Table with hardly any difficulty at all other than understanding the concept of this possession. So I know you're wondering, okay, then what's the con? I don't even know if you can call this a con, but supposedly the real Siegfried fires his Balmung faster. In terms of speed, it goes the real Siegfried is first, base SIEG is second, and then possession servant Siegfried is the slowest output. But again, with that possession Siegfried being able to draw out all of its power, he doesn't even really need the speed. This doesn't even account for the fact of the other things he has going on, which is the absorption of Frankenstein's magecraft. By interacting with Frankenstein's move, he was able to absorb her skill galvanism and use it later as his own. You see, this is a circus act. SIEG's servant possession was an amazing concept, and it still is. It was kind of silly how it came together, but it was still interesting to watch. Until he took in Frankenstein too. And it's like, huh? Like, why? And before the jackass comes in and actually explains, well, actually, the reason, I'm not literally asking why, it's rhetorical. I'm saying, why write this? By this logic, you might as well have him take in every servant. Majin Buu, let him take in Karna. How about Achilles while he's at it? Holy, I said it before and I'll say it again. Goetia was right. And guess what? We're still not finished. To make this even more foolish, initially he was only supposed to transform 3 times, right? That was the limit. And then later on, this evolves into him not needing the transformation altogether. He retains nearly everything. He retained the speed, he retains the strength, he retains Siegfried's sword skills. I'm like, wow, that is some really impressive plot armor you got there. I'm truly blown away. I kid you not. And the reason for this is because from a narrative standpoint, he's the type of character that learns things really quickly based on his design. He's an expert at processing due to his composition. But you know what? I can look past all of that. I'm a bigger man than that. The real slap in the face is what he did with Frankenstein's galvanism. When Cheryl was still about to defeat him, after getting through all of this nonsense, SIEG pulls out her galvanism and self-destructs in the same fashion that Frankenstein did. Excuse me? It was his own modified version of her blasted tree phantasm. And I wanted to pull this up just so you guys can see exactly what I mean. So again, galvanism ended up being one of his skills. It's a conversion technique. It allows for the conversion of energy into electricity, thereby giving him access to using it on a mechanical level to do things like charge yourself. This is how Frankenstein was born altogether. That's why she had it. What this means is that you can strengthen yourself, you can charge and heal yourself, you can use this to neutralize attacks, and those are just some of the examples that it gives. Wind manipulation, magic bullets, beam attacks, all of that's going to be turned into magical energy. It's almost like one of those scenarios where you're hitting the person with your own blast and you're boosting them up, you're charging them. You should be doing damage, but they're the ones getting bolstered. So on top of all those things regarding Siegfried, he gained those too, at least for the time being. In addition to that, we've seen him perfectly reproduce Siegfried's armor of Fafnir, which is something that allows Siegfried to nullify anything that's B rank or lower, except for the part that the dragon blood missed, making him super tanky, and it gave Mordred an extremely hard time getting in on his possession form. Now granted, Mordred had just gotten out of a fight herself, but you know that's something that wouldn't stop her either. And on top of all of that, we see him tap into the powers of Fafnir himself, where he turned into the actual dragon form after he ran out of command spells. By proxy, SIEG has gained access to this as well. So a lot of these things are just going to show the example of what a proper homunculus can do when they're fused with the spirit. You think that's something? Just wait until you see Ishtar and Strange Fate. And the crazy thing about it is, it didn't even have to be Siegfried. Siegfried was just the person that they used as an example. But given the format, he could have fused with pretty much anybody that was compatible, or at least had some type of composition that allows them to be used as a magic core. You know, looking back, Siegfried is supposed to be immortal by design. I'm fine with that. So when you think about it, even when he gave up his heart, it's not that unrealistic that he lives on through somebody else, because again, he's supposed to be immortal anyway. He's supposed to be hard to kill. He's one of the only few servants in the verse that has that buff. But if that was the case, if you were just gonna do all this to bring him back anyway, you might as well just fleshed out his character. I've always loved Siegfried's lore, man. If you go back and look at my old videos, and the OGs know, Siegfried was one of the first lores that I did on the channel. I was delighted to see him in action, but not like this. Yeah, man. Siegfried got shafted, Shiro got shafted, Mordred, You got Joan over here sucking him off for the entire show. And how could I forget my boy Karna? My poor boy Karna. One of the strongest servants in the Nasuverse, bar none. Mind you that the real Siegfried was struggling to bring Karna to a stalemate. And this is the best part, hands down. Now remember how I just said that Possession Siegfried would have the slowest release out of them all? Well, apparently we're gonna make some changes to that too. Now that he's taken in Frankenstein's galvanism, he can now use the ability to offset the difference, becoming the fastest and the strongest. So when Karna tries to use his Vasavi Shakti, which is one of the strongest moves out there, as you can plainly see, it swallows up everything in the scene. Sig just cuts straight through it. There you have it, Possession Siegfried. Then he made Astolfo his servant. I'm finished. I can't take anymore.